Everybody, welcome to DC Signal to Noise for what has been just an unbelievable week. And we're doing the pre-show here before we get to recording. So thanks for joining us here on the Facebook Live portion of this. And Jim, I got to say, first off, in what is a crazy week, it is really a comfort to come here and get perspective from you. And also kind of in this community that we've built here with Signal to Noise. We don't always agree with each other, but we do it in a way that I think we all learn from those disagreements. And it's a comfort to be here with this group of people here on this Friday.
I agree. All right. And
our
listeners too. Yeah, they know how to.
Yeah, that's what I mean. It's everybody that joins in, especially when you push us. We really appreciate that. And hope you'll do it again today. So drop a comment, drop a question in the comment section there on Facebook, and load them up early so that we can make sure we get to everything through the conversation. If there's something you want us to talk about today, Jim, things on my list so far. Obviously, we'll talk a little bit about the impeachment and what comes next there, including a couple farmers were on the list of those Republicans who voted to impeach. Talk about the transition, Biden coming in with no confirmed cabinet members, looks like very probably. Want to follow up with you, Jim, on some comments that Ray Starling made about how prepared this administration is coming in because of their experience and what that actually could mean in new regulation. So I want to explore that a little bit with you, Jim. We got more CFAP money coming out. We'll talk about that. And what it means, Biden's coronavirus plan and what's in there, and a twist on some CCC money in there that you brought out, Jim, in your newsletter today. We'll talk about that. And of course, the bombshell from National Ag Statistics Service and the World Board this week in their reports that really threw the markets, will throw much higher, and will probably continue to send them much higher for some time to come. We'll talk about that. Anything else on your list, Jim?
That's a pretty good one. We can very briefly maybe get into the RFS things, but I think basically the bottom line is the current EPA punted it to the next EPA, and they're waiting for the Supreme Court. But we can talk about that.
Yeah, let's get into that a little bit.
Very important, big issue for corn producers.
Well, probably more news is what was going on behind the scenes in that, or wasn't going on behind the scenes. We don't really know yet. We're with the Reuters story and all that. There was a lot of positioning there that probably was more noise than signal, but there's a story there. And Audrey checking in with how are we going to help our farmers? No farmers, no food. I agree wholeheartedly, and I think a number of the issues we're going to talk about today, we'll get to that.
That's bipartisan in helping farmers, because you've seen both with Trump and now with Biden, they know that they need the food, and with the cash flow drains that we saw, they're pumping the money. So I don't see that is not a partisan issue.
No, it's not a partisan issue, and not only the food side of things, but also the trust that farmers have, and what that means in the political spectrum, I think also is nonpartisan. And so even though we have seen farmers more so support Republicans than Democrats, I think both sides see value in courting the farmer vote in there. We'll get into that a little bit too. All right. Well, with that, again, one last reminder, send us some comments and questions in there like Audrey did, and we'll discuss them here on the podcast. With that, let's get rolling here in 3, 2, 1. Welcome to DC Signal to Noise on this Friday on a very crazy week. I'm John Harris, joined by Jim Wiesmeyer of Pro Farmer, our diviner of signal and noise, and a lot of both to sort through this week, Jim Wiesmeyer.
Yes.
I want to start with another reminder that if you are listening to this podcast and want to join in the conversation next time, join us at 2 p.m. Eastern on the AgriTalk Facebook page, where we stream this live as we're recording it. And you can send us questions in real time and join the conversation as we're doing this. And a lot of questions and comments coming in right off the bat. So looking forward to getting those. Keep them coming and drive the conversation here. Jim, let's start. I don't think we can start any conversation this week without talking about the events in DC and the impeachment votes. Just first of all, your initial reaction to the House voting to impeach President Trump and sending it to the Senate that doesn't look like it's going to take it up until after Joe Biden has been sworn in as president.
Yeah, John, that's the weirdness of it. What didn't surprise me in the House, because I think that there is fervent hatred, if you will, with Trump on the Democratic, leadership there. The Democrats are trying to remove Trump from office even after he leaves office. That's just weird to me. But I understand the animosity. Okay, but the Democrats are proposing, John, to use impeachment to disqualify Trump from forever running for federal office again. I think that's their real focus here, and frankly, a number of Republicans who don't want to go so public with it. But the Democrats say that feature requires only a majority vote in the Senate. But boy, my talks with constitutional scholars say that they think the Constitution really requires a conviction before
Right?
punishment,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
that means
Everything I
two-thirds of the Senate would have to
Well,
vote.
it's 2/3 of the Senate for a conviction first, and then once they get a conviction, then they can come back with a simple majority for the votes to keep
Absolutely.
him from holding federal office. But you've got to have, like you said, that 2/3 majority for the conviction first before anything else can be done in the impeachment process. And I get what you're saying, Jim, but as I said last week, I really think that there needs to be something done at a formal level to rebuke this. And I would agree with, when you have a president who has incited a riot against another branch of government, I think that is warranted to bar him from holding federal office, him or her, from holding federal office again. And so, I think this action is warranted because there is no other mechanism to really accomplish that. Other than, you could argue that if President Trump were to be convicted of inciting an insurrection, then he would be barred from holding federal office again by Section 3 of the 14th Amendment.
Yes.
But that's a little more of a more intricate action, and not a formal rebuke like an impeachment conviction would be.
But again, look at the first time he was impeached by the House. They took a long time, discussing it with papers and things like that, research, if you will. This thing really went faster than an HBO series on television, a short series. So again, that raises question marks too. And usually, Trump didn't even have the opportunity to defend himself. Now, I know he's done a lot of things that make your hair curl, okay? But he has not yet been convicted. And that's why the Senate maneuver is so important here. But until then, I just don't think you can deny anyone office until they've had a bona fide trial, if you will. And that always has taken place in the Senate, not the House.
Yeah, which leads me to be somewhat sympathetic to this notion that's being bandied about of somewhat delaying the Senate trial so that process can play. Of course, so the process can play out. Of course, the other argument to that is they're saying they don't want it to get in the way of Biden's first 100 days agenda. That's immaterial to me. But I think that before there is the Senate trial, it should be a true trial, and there should be time to lay out the evidence on both sides on that.
Yes.
And they're still gathering the evidence on both sides on that.
Well, I had to chuckle somewhat, John, when they said they need time in the 100 days. Let's have the Senate work 5 days a week like farmers do, if not more, of course. They only work 3 days a week now. So they're saying take morning for business and afternoon for the impeachment process, or vice versa. Come on, give me a break. They can stay in town until it's done. So I don't ever buy time arguments. And what's so important about 100 days? We saw that with Trump, the same type of routine. That's more the media mumbo jumble than anything else.
Indeed. So, how do you see this playing out over the next weeks and possibly months?
I see it trying to extract total pain, as long as they can. And I want to see and hear outgoing Senate Majority Leader Mitch McConnell, Republican from Kentucky, his official position on it. Not that he is thinking about it or hasn't made a decision. Because if he were to say no for impeachment, then there's not a chance that the Senate would impeach him. If he says that he would vote for impeachment, then it becomes an interesting,
Hmm.
vote count. So that's the signal, if you will, John, that I'm looking for, because I think now, McConnell is a very, very important person on his way out as the leader of the Senate.
Well, isn't it a pretty strong statement already that McConnell has not pushed back against that reporting from the New York Times this week?
Well, initially, he basically said there was some report saying he was in favor of impeachment, and he said that was too strong. He has just not made up his mind. And I thought, when I first saw the thing that he had made up his mind, I thought that doesn't sound like the McConnell I know. He usually ponders it for a while. Plus, it's not come up for a vote anyway. Plus, they have to hear the process. What kind of reasoning, are they going to use? But I will tell you, in the Republican Party, John, they're dividing the Trump presidency, and I said this on AgriTalk, into the
Hmm.
long period before November 3rd that Trump honestly had major accomplishments, and also the time period after November 3rd, when it was mostly disaster after disaster. So this is the hard part of this. You've got the Republicans torn right now, and that's going to be years impact there. I think you're beginning, more than beginning, to see the multiple split in the Republican Party because of the dichotomies between, the different factions, the Trump Party, the traditional Republican Party, and the middle of the road Republicans. So there's three parties right there, potential in the years ahead. That sounds like Europe. It is. And then you have the Democrats. I think that's going to come later. Their fracturing is going to come later after the far left doesn't get not just most of what they want, everything what they want. There's going to be carping there. So they're going to have to go through this divorce pattern too. Bottom line, I think we're due for 3 to 5 political parties over the next decade. And that's not a bad thing to me. That's not a
Well, that's
bad
what I
thing.
was going to mention is that, you've got two political parties that have more and more gone to representing the fringes of the political spectrum here in the U.S., and there really isn't much of anything representing those in the middle. So, is a third party or fourth party not that bad of an idea?
Oh no, I think it would be a great idea because I don't know when I'm soon to maybe go back out on the speaking circuit and network again. I can't wait. But that's what I was hearing from a lot of people, that they didn't think either party really spoke to them. But here's another angle. Biden last evening in Wilmington, when he announced his first of two parts on his COVID aid, he promised to lay out a Build Back Better recovery plan before a joint session of Congress next month. Now, I guess that's the State of the Union. I'm not quite sure, but think about that. If the nerves are still frazzled, if this impeachment process is still going on, can you imagine? And this follows what was it, the last one? It seems like forever, where the Speaker of the House deplorably tore up the copy of Trump's speech at the State of the Union address. So that doesn't sound like trying to get along to me if that were to occur. But I know Biden is probably very nervous about this because he said last night he wants to unveil historic investments in infrastructure, manufacturing, innovation, and clean energy. That's hard to do when you've got a fractured, Congress and party, not just in the U.S. but across this great country.
Yeah, well, and I would add to that leadership on both sides of the dome on both parties that's solely interested in political gamesmanship and not really about addressing the needs of the American public right now.
Well, look at DC right now. I haven't seen it like this since 9/11, since shortly after 9/11 when I went downtown. That's when I worked downtown every day. And I saw policemen on every corner, and I saw airplanes going back and forth. The black ones. I forget what they Blackhawks, I guess. Yeah, and that was scary. But this one, I think, might rival that with over 20,000 troops there almost a week before the inauguration. This country, based on the emails and talks I'm having into the Midwest and elsewhere, they're not just upset; they're very upset.
Well, in fact, we're even seeing it reflected in some of the comments we're getting here. We'll get to those in just a little bit. I do want to point out briefly that two of the Republican votes for impeachment came from farmers. And I know I'm going to butcher his name, David Valadao. I think it's something like that, from California's dairy farmer.
Valdao.
And Dan Newhouse from Washington State, farmer near Yakima. So two of those votes did come from farmers out on the West Coast.
Well, they're swing districts, and it's a vote of conscience, I would say. So I'm not going to fault anyone for voting a certain way on something that important. They had to go through probably a lot of internal, mashing and meshing, with themselves on that one. Although in the case of Cheney, Republican in the House, she's third in leadership. I may have some other comments on that. Just think she would have been better off not just to restrain from voting when your leadership, does that. I think it raises questions, but that's just me.
All right. And, try to flip through some of these comments here. And again, I'm not going to go into the ones claiming that we did not have a free and fair election. We did have a free and fair election. We need to get over that.
Here's what it is, John, on that one. I know, and you've heard the same thing, that the hurtfulness amongst the people who did not win this election, their party. I understand that. However, what occurred, I don't know why Trump did what he did. Maybe he believed his lawyers. But the bottom line, I tell my family in the Midwest who are so upset, and the ones who are pro-Trump and then some, I tell them, look, the lawyers that Trump had, Giuliani, etc., were saying things publicly, but then when they went into court, they didn't repeat those same things. And because why? They couldn't prove it.
Yeah, they didn't have the evidence.
They didn't have the evidence. So if there was evidence, you don't pay as much money as Trump has been doing. What, $20,000 a day for Giuliani? Boy, you talk about.
Well, that he says he's not. He's now not, or reports are that he's not going to pay it now.
I don't blame him now.
Well,
that's
yeah,
the advice he got. But that's what I say. That evidence has to be shown, and But then some people come back saying they threw it away and things like that. Well, then you say, okay, next question. Doesn't solve it. But these things are going to linger. There's no doubt in my mind. They're going to linger for a long time.
And that's not to say elections aren't without fault. And so I think that Congress should take up election reform in this next Congress. One, to clean up the faults that are still there, and two, to restore confidence.
But what does Nancy Pelosi do as Speaker of the House? She puts H.R. Bill number 1, the first one that shows their major focus. She gets into codifying even more changes for the election process of some of the potential snags that we saw on November the 3rd or the days leading up to that. That does not help, John. It just does not.
No, it doesn't. No, it does not. All right, enough about the election. Let's get in. Let's go some of the questions, because some of the questions we're getting tie into some of the topics we're going to talk about. From Terry, is the CFAP round of payments referred to as CFAP 3? If not, what is CFAP 3? And no, we're talking about leftover CFAP.
The ones today? I'm confused. Because they announced supplemental.
Right. We still got CFAP 2 money to the tune of what, 2 points?
$2.3 billion. It's
Yeah,
actually CFAP 1 and 2, unused funding for CFAP 1 and 2. They've made some very good changes, and really that will help contract livestock producers, primarily hogs and poultry, into getting what was the payment? $17 a head, I would think, in hogs, and that's a chunk of change. And a number of other changes that, again, if they had five more chances to do CFAP, they'd probably get it pretty good. So that tells me USDA continues to learn from the faults of the other two, CFAPs. But this does not include CFAP, what I call CFAP 3, that
right.
Congress passed December the 21st. That's the what usually known as the $600 checks, for the direct payments. That's above and beyond. That's $13 billion for agriculture. That's separate from what they announced today, the up to $2.3 billion. And I'm just looking at the language. For a number of producers out there, this will hit home. FSA is going to use 100% instead of 85% of the 2019 Ag Risk Coverage County Option ARC County ARCCO benchmark yield to calculate payments when the APH is not available. That to me, that's a major change as well. And
Hmm.
sign up for most producers. I think this $17 per head payment is going to automatically be made, but it's going to run from January the 19th to February the 26th. So bottom line, this is more cash flow out there, and especially to the contract producers who really need it, John.
Yeah, and Eric, our producer, if you throw up that graphic to show just how dramatically this will impact those contract growers. Again, most of these are going to be pork, but quite a number of poultry contract growers and some others. But that shows you from Farm Bureau just where that money is going and how much of it is going to those contract growers. And as you point out, Jim, this is a group that needs it. They, unlike other sectors of agriculture, are not seeing a market resurgence right now. They have been struggling. They're going to see some increasing competition from China as that country gets their pork herd back in line after African swine fever. So this is a sector that needs it and hasn't been able to latch on
Yes.
to that CFAP money up until this point.
Yes, and you can see, and this, I want to point out that this, chart, yeah, you said from Farm Bureau, John Newton, he's their top economist. John has just been so good. You talk about an effective communicator who knows how to do charts. So I constantly, congratulate him in my emails to him, and we converse off and on. And you can see his asterisk on the support for contract growers. That rounds to 1.9 billion dollars out of that 2.3, and that includes the swine, chicken, eggs and turkeys. But this is a fairly good forecast estimate of his of how those segments break out. The 150 million, I guess it would be, yes. Top up payments for swine producers. Then you've got turf grass and sod, pullets and byproducts were added for the first time. 100 million, that's good for that industry. And then the top up for CFAP 2 sales based commodities, 30 million. And then the top up for price trigger commodities, 20 million. So again, a surprise. This was a surprise because it caught us all off guard, and as we were going right on to agri talk almost, and
Yeah.
I had to get the information out. I thought, oh my goodness. But anyway, bottom line, this shows USDA can act fast. I think this shows that the OMB is pumping out rules, office management, and budget like you wouldn't believe in the waning days of the Trump administration, John.
And I would encourage anybody out there that I think everybody watching and listening to this is interested in ag policy. Follow John Newton on Twitter. You're going to see a chart as informative as that, if not more so, just about every day.
Yeah.
Is just like you said, a great educator So,
And John's background, I mean, he knows his policy. You know, he worked at a number of positions where he had to learn policy, and he's an expert graphic person. So
yeah.
yes, I haven't utilized Farm Bureau charts. I've utilized more since he's got there than my first 40 years in the business. That tells you everything right there.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. Another question coming in here, if I can find it, from Farmer Tom. Can you talk about USDA published final rule for domestic production of hemp? You got any details on that, Jim?
No, but they put something out the other day. I can't remember what they put out, but they did put out the proposal. Maybe I can.
Well, I'll tell you what. We will come back on that one in a later week, and
Yeah, or I might. I
we'll bring
just
in an
flipped it
expert
to
on it
show
because
you ongoing how fast some sources can be. I flipped somebody a quick text to see if they can give me a response to that. This
there
is
you go.
live. And I did want to say a couple listeners, John, emailed me, one today and three yesterday, that they got their WIP Plus payments, the last 50% on 2019.
Oh,
So they
good.
were very pleased. So it tells me USDA is beginning to clear up the avalanche of applications, particularly in a couple of states, North Dakota and South Dakota, that they were behind on for some pretty good reasons because they were trying to do many others things. Plus, with the COVID, with the I guess some employees out of business as well.
All right, let's hit a couple more before we move back to our list. And I lost the one I was going to. Oh, there we go. From Jim Smith, commenting on our discussion about multi-party. This is a multi-party system, forced coalition building and compromise is what we need. Thanks for that,
Yes,
Jim.
and see the secret when you look, I was a history major in college actually. When you look at multiple party governments in the world by country, when you have multiple parties, a lot of times they don't have enough votes to get things done, so they have to compromise with different factions to get the necessary votes. And we don't have that now because it's two-party rule. Almost feels like the Democrats want to go to uniparty rule with some, not all, of their proposals with getting rid of the filibuster, but I don't think they'll succeed. Getting D.C. and Puerto Rico a state, which would add 3 to 4 Democratic senators, things like that. That's what multiple parties could bring you, the necessity to seek compromise in
Mm-hmm.
order to get anything done, John.
Yep. Frank, following up on that, globalists in China are in charge now. It will make no difference ever to vote in a national election again. I would not agree with that.
That's
I think it's big.
Yeah. If you don't vote, you vote. Actually,
Right.
my father
Yeah.
taught me that when I was a little kid. Yeah. I understand raw feelings. Sit on it a while, 3, 6 months, and around election time, you'll want to vote because you should. That's what I would say. But I understand raw feelings. I really do. This was a hurtful election.
Yep. All right. And let's see. um, Somebody say, yeah, Austin saying, let's get off the politics and talk about agriculture. So let's talk about
Absolutely.
agriculture for a little
Absolutely.
bit. Um, let's let's talk about well, actually, we're going to talk about politics and agriculture and where they intersect. And so let's talk about the Biden team announced their coronavirus plan this week and laid it out. They're pushing for the additional $1,400 per person or for most people, in stimulus payments. Anything of particular interest to agriculture in there, Jim?
Well, with food stamps, they extended the current benefits through September, the additional benefits through September. They were supposed to end in June. So anything food stamps is good for agriculture for a host of commodities, dairy, dry edible bean products, things like that, meat, if you will. But that's basically it for agriculture. It's now if you qualify for the child tax credit, which is big, and the additional $1,400 payments, including college kids, if you qualify. That was something. But above and beyond that, there was an interesting remark by a Biden official regarding CCC.
Yeah,
John, do you
this
want
is
to fill the
intriguing.
background on that? Yeah.
Well, yeah, you broke this in your newsletter this morning, and I'm dying to find out more about this. That we could see CCC money go to restaurants.
That's what they're asking out loud. And so this is one of now several things where different groups are, now that they know the Commodity Credit Corporation is a funding mechanism, you're going to see more of this, John, as groups, if they can't find money elsewhere, they'll say, what about USDA CCC? They have the foggiest idea what it is, but they
Right.
know that it's like a potential funding mechanism. Now, I don't think there's legal authority to do it, but they would need legislative authority. Now, but I can see the
Well, now,
linkage. I can see the linkage because of the
yeah,
restaurant and food and things like that. And as I said earlier, with creative lawyers, they can do wonders in getting authorization. I wouldn't rule it out.
yeah, and if it were something that were structured as purchasing food, or money going into to somehow enabling those restaurants to buy more beef or pork or whatever, you might be able to get it through. But yeah, direct payments to restaurants would be pretty difficult. But as you said, I can see the linkage and see where the benefits agriculture would be in doing something like that.
Yes, I do. And we had a caller on AgriTalk that raised the possibility of using checkoff funds for the restaurant purposes, but that raises a host of other issues. Something to be at least discussed, but I think there's already a lot of very prescriptive rules and regulations on checkoffs. So that would, face a lot of hurdles on that.
It would, but I thought it was a brilliant
It
idea. I
was.
mean,
It was.
uh,
But we'd have to
what
see the
more could
money involved and
right?
things like that. You could evaporate because the checkoffs are very controversial anyway. But I've learned to respect the checkoff funding because it's market development and research, and it has funded a lot of good things. But I know when prices are down and farmers have to write some checks, I know that can get a little raw on a topic too. But it should at least be aired out as a policy option.
Yeah, but what more could you do to boost the beef and pork industries right now than to make sure that restaurants are ready to go and ready to boom once we're past coronavirus?
Yes. Well, that could have been a line item also in the different aid programs as well, though. So maybe, see, because agriculture, they won't say this publicly, but the ag stakeholders will say, the CCC is a mechanism to help support at the farm level. And I know what you said before, indirectly, when you help the restaurant industry that has just been pummeled by these rules, especially from certain states, some of the silly rules by states not to keep them open. So, yes, it's an issue that's going to be aired. That's not a question of if, John, it's going to be aired.
All right. Let's turn back a little bit to the Biden administration here and the transition that's going to be coming next week. And one thing of note in that transition is it looks very possible that Joe Biden may have no cabinet approved by the Senate by the time he is sworn in. Does that present a problem?
Well, it's always a problem when you don't have your top cabinet personnel in. I think there could be, let's see, Treasury Secretary Janet Yellen, who used to be Federal Reserve Chairwoman, her hearing is the 19th. And then they're going to vote in the Senate Finance Panel. They'll vote on that, and then they'll also vote to send it to the floor. So she could get in fairly quickly. I think she would be the exception rather than the rule, but you need her there for Treasury Secretary because we know under Trump how important Mnuchin was as his
Yeah.
Treasury Treasury Secretary. But this is also why earlier in the week Biden put out, or his people put out, that they were going to tap a series of career people to make the transition more fluid until the cabinet people can be put in. And there, as we've mentioned on this program before, there are scores of very intelligent, knowledgeable career people in almost every agency and department, John.
Yeah, and indeed, and we're seeing a very experienced team come back in, assuming they get Senate approval. What happens at USDA specifically in this interim before Tom Vilsack presumably is sworn in as USDA secretary?
Well, I think USDA more than almost any other department can run. I won't say as a on drive, but they have long time experienced, career people, and so I just don't see any major problems. I honestly don't. Will it be as smooth? Absolutely not. But and Vilsack, of course, is working behind the scenes, and he
Mm-hmm.
knows the levers to pick. He's got other people that he worked with that are still at USDA, so he can tap them. So I don't think USDA is going to miss a beat.
And we talk about the advantages of having this very experienced staff coming in with the Biden administration because they have been challenged in this transition. They are going to be ahead of what others would have been that haven't been in government before. But also, I want to bring this up. Ray Starling was on AgriTalk this week, and he didn't talk about this on air, but sent us a note afterwards talking about that. He talked about appreciation for the experience this team has, but also a bit of wariness that experience means that they can hit the ground running very quickly on new regulation and can be very aggressive in new regulation because they don't have to find where the bathrooms are first.
A lot of that has merit for reasoning. I will tell you though, in the immigration area where Trump was very aggressive in the regulatory side and the executive order side, I think they're going to be surprised at how long it may take them to change some of those rules and regulations because of court test, John.
Hmm.
And so we're in the age of litigation. And I think you'll see that for slowing things down. But even on some of these regulations, Biden has already indicated, and I think rightfully so, he wants to go a little slower on those at the first because he doesn't want to move too fast and upset everything. So I think he's going to focus on the vaccine implementation and getting those that additional aid money, part one, as we saw the $1.9 trillion announcement. But he has to get that approved by Congress first, John, and that
Right.
may not be as easy as some think. I think they're setting up a two-part test in the Democratic controlled House and Senate. They're going to try to get a bipartisan vote. It'll get approved in the House. But the Senate, depending on, boy, there's some controversial aspects of this $1.9 trillion package, including $350 billion for state and local governments that Republicans really fought against because they don't want to bail out the big city governments not well run in New York, Chicago, and California. But also the upping the minimum wage to $15. Now, while that won't impact some states, it will others. So those are two controversial things that you may not have, and he's going to need ten Republicans to get out of the 60 vote rule, the
Well, maybe.
filibuster. Yeah,
Maybe. Because if they do a straight up vote on it, then yeah, he'll have to pass the filibuster and get 60 votes in the Senate to get it through, unless they can somehow. And I would guess that they will test the waters there, and if they think they can get the 60 votes, move it. If not, they may try a maneuver under budget reconciliation where they only need a simple
they will.
majority.
That's the second of the two-part plan that I
Yeah.
mentioned, but that's going to take time. You just don't like an impeachment. You just can't go like that and get budget reconciliation. Harder than impeachment, apparently. So it's going to mean that those funds will be delayed even further if they have to go the budget reconciliation route. And they only have so many times that they can tap budget reconciliation. So that could slow it down as well, John. But Democrats would use that as saying, see, we told you the Republicans are just going to block everything. So I think that they'll maybe take some things out of this package, and they can do that as leadership,
Yeah.
in order to get the 60 votes. And I think probably that's what's going to occur.
All right. We're
Wait a
getting a
minute, I
couple
just
questions.
got an update on the
Oh,
hemp. The final
yeah.
rule is to be published in February according to the action regulatory agenda released by the Trump administration. Um, there was nothing USDA released on that day, or the 12th, when Office of Management and Budget finished its review. There's 301 pages in the Federal Register on this
Well,
one. And that was the note I just got. But it's a little update. I would say details to follow. Okay.
there you go. We'll see if we can't get a hemp expert on maybe next
Yes,
week
absolutely. I got
to give us
pulling
an
out of a
update.
meeting, by the way.
As well, you should.
Yes.
Uh, some couple questions about CFAP 3 that we'll get to in just a second. Circling back to our discussion about using checkoff money to support the restaurant industry. Nathan commenting, food industry would need to use U.S. produced commodities to be fair. Well, certainly, I'm sure that would be a requirement if something like that came
You would
about.
hope.
So
You would hope.
certainly.
Yeah.
Certainly. Let me see if I can. Yeah, Gene, and I assume this is in regard to CFAP 3. I'd heard there was going to be land payments of $20 per acre. Is that true?
Yes, that's an easier way to do it. $20 an acre. They simplified it, but that is a correct observation.
All right. And then Stephen, good morning, Jan's tuning in now. Any time frame on CFAP 3 blueberry grower on in Oregon here?
Now that's a good question. Now we had let's see, who did we? I think were they on AgriTalk? I can't remember. So much is going on
All the
this week.
shows start to run together eventually, don't
Yes,
they?
they do. But they're saying now at the end of this quarter, if not at the beginning of the next quarter, because apparently with these changes uh, in CFAP 3 versus the other two, there has to be some computer changes and other things. So, if you've ever worked with an IT department, they're not speedy. So they're kind of signaling that it's going to take time to rewrite the software, if you will.
Well, and isn't there a little bit of, we'll let the next guy handle it
Could
too?
be. It could be. Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. But and then it has to go through clearing process because of those changes. And OMB is stacked up, like trucks in Brazil at soybean harvest time. They've had to chew through a lot. So they don't ever want to say this publicly, but that's probably what's going on. So I would say later uh, uh, in the January, February, March quarter, or even the first quarter of the second quarter, the beginning of the second quarter this calendar year. That's what I've been told.
Matt coming on that. We need government out of agriculture. I I wouldn't necessarily disagree, other than to say food is going to cost what it is one way or another, whether you're paying for it with government involvement or whether you're paying for it at the retail price at the grocery store. It's going to adjust to keep the same price no matter what you do, because that's what the cost of production is.
Yeah, I understand where that caller is coming from. There's certain days I say, "Oh my God,"
Yeah.
but you need food safety, and food protection, and a safety net, because for those years, and we've been going through them more often than not, to where through Mother Nature has just been dastardly. So that's an element of, you need crop insurance, and even though farmers write huge checks for crop insurance, there is a subsidy involved, and I think it can be easily defended as a result of food protection. That protects our food supply to have it grown and have a cash flow for the basis to grow the next year's crop. On the farmer safety nets, although they could be improved, it does indeed help in many cases, the smaller to medium-sized producer. But what's wrong with that? And we have payment caps, so they're not too onerous. on that. So yeah, I can see it's the American public wants their food and they don't want to get into shortages. Where you said they don't want to pay like Europe does at the
Right.
supermarket or even Japan. I think we have a combination. We pay it at the supermarket and an income transfer, payments by taxpayers, not the government, taxpayers.
And Matt follows up with agree, but hard for young people to get in.
That
He's
is
not
true.
necessarily. It is true, but government getting out isn't going to make it any easier for young people to get in either. And I would argue pretty strongly that that's a very serious question that we need to address somehow. We just haven't found the solution yet.
Well, that's on AgriTalk, we had, I think, one of the first interviews that David Scott, the new incoming House Ag Committee chairman from Georgia, had, and he mentioned entry, problems into
Mm-hmm.
agriculture, where I think, and I'm paraphrasing, John, you heard him, that he said, a lawyer or another businessman could put a sign up outside their house and start a business. You can't do that in agriculture.
No.
You have to have land, you have to have equipment, you have to have seed, all of which any people in the audience knows that's not cheap. And I think
Indeed. And
one of the reasons for payment caps, I never liked payment limitations. As a letter rip. But however, when I went to California one year, many years ago, a farmer told me, land would never come out of on the market here if we wouldn't have payment caps where farmers say, okay, well, if I can't get a payment for this, I'm going to sell this ground. So there are some unintended consequences of some rules and regulations. But again, nothing's perfect, but those are some of the lessons I've learned.
Yeah, indeed. All right, before we leave CFAP, Jameson asks about details on CFAP 3 for cattle.
Cattle, it's the deep cattle. I know there's a payment. Boy, I'd have to go back. I should know that. But cattle was handled quite well in the CFAP 3. Additional, where they've gone
Yeah, it was a
back
per
and
head payment.
in per
Yeah.
head payment, and they've changed the dates on the calculation because of the complaints of how it was of how it was set before. Those are the primary cattle, features of CFAP 3, which is I continue to say they've learned from the lessons where they went wrong in CFAP 1 and CFAP 2. Although CFAP 2 was much better than 1, their changes in CFAP 3 are even better.
And I didn't have this on my list, Jim, and I'm really glad Melody is bringing this up because I think it was an interesting story this week. Bill Gates owns 250,000 acres, largest ag landowner in the U.S. That stuck up on a lot of people, including me. It's fairly surprising.
Yes, it did. And I think I wrote about it today, and some of I know Nebraska was his operations. Let me see where else. I know it was my last item. I'm just going through. I can get right to it here. Let me just
But a
bookmark.
lot of interest in sustainability, obviously, is that's been a focus
Yeah.
of his
He's
foundation.
purchased 242,000 acres of farmland across 18 states, and this is quoting Forbes magazine, so you might want to Google the Forbes magazine on this. His largest holdings are in Louisiana, almost 70,000 acres, Arkansas, almost 50,000 acres, and Nebraska, call it 21,000 acres. So that tells me
Wow.
he's got a lot of land in other states, 15 other states. So, like any producer should do in marketing, he has spread his risk, John, across this great country.
Well, it'd be interesting to track, and maybe we can get him on here or AgriTalk to talk about what their ultimate plan is.
One time I
We'll have to.
interviewed his father, I remember years ago. Yeah.
Hmm.
And I met him, Bill Gates, as a young guy because he was tallying along with his father. That goes back for many, decades there. I hope we
The
get
moral
to
of that story, ladies and gentlemen, is that Jim Wiesmeyer is old.
oh, I think I want to get to the USDA reports for sure, John.
Yeah, well,
There's
let's
like,
jump there
yeah.
because USDA, both National Ag Statistics Service and the World Board, threw quite a curveball at agriculture on Tuesday this week. Yeah, go ahead, Jim.
I lost you. Are you there?
I'm here. Are you there?
I'm trying to see. I can hear you.
All right. Well, let's go with it. I can hear you now, Jim. So,
Okay,
what
good.
We had probably the biggest news was that USDA NASS dropped the average corn yield estimate by 3.8 bushels, which is the largest November to January drop we've ever seen. This has got a lot of people up in arms, understandably so. I think there's people throwing out accusations that aren't warranted, but there certainly are questions that need to be asked about how this came about, Jim.
Well, you wonder. It was ear weight, I believe, in corn primarily, and pod weights for soybeans. What did they drop soybeans? What, a half a bushel to 50.2 average. This again, I believe you're having someone from NASS on AgriTalk on Tuesday, John.
Yeah, Lance Honig, who's head of the crops division.
Who's a good
So
guy.
the guy that, yeah, good guy, in charge of coming up with these numbers with his team. So he'll have a lot of answers for us about how they got to where they are. And I think you made a good observation on AgriTalk this morning, Jim, along with Chip, about that these guys are statisticians. They want to get this number right, but they also go where the data lead them, which I think we can argue that the data led them to some wrong places somewhere along the path this harvest season.
Yes, I think they better get a committee to review their not just methodology, the quality of their information, and they may have to bring in some other tools. Even further use of satellite imagery, but even at a certain point that gets hard. But yeah, a reassessment needs to be made because I'll point out cotton. For many months, and we've written about this, we even discussed it on Signal to Noise, how our good cotton growers, Lubbock area, I have more than a few friends there in the cotton industry. In August, they were telling us USDA is way too high on the U.S. cotton crop. And they finally are catching up to where the cotton industry was many months ago, John. And that really shouldn't be. Now, that the downside of this is hurting USDA's credibility because we typically have had grain stocks, report surprises. So, but as you said, when you have a record change in corn yield, between November and January annual summary, that raises more questions than answers, and that should be addressed. Then you have that cotton issue. I want them to try to defend. I think it was the lack of funding mechanism in the Texas, crop surveys, from what I've been told. If that's the case, they need to true that one up. And then in the case of the World Board, now remember, those are not surveys. The World Board is more subjective. They're just like any other commodity analyst in the business. It's their thoughts, it's their assumptions on demand side. But again, this World Board was so low, so long on China's corn import estimates from total. We had it on the program several times again. So, I wrote earlier this week, what's going on at USDA? You don't like to see this because farmers, ranchers, traders, users, they have to have faith in the credibility of USDA. So I think this hurts, and I think they're going to have to look into it. But I want to hear what Koenig has to say because he's a career person, he's an expert, and I think that he should be quite reasonable in some of the reasons. I just hope that he says what they're going to do to avoid this in the future.
Yeah, and again, we're going to remain to be critical of what came out of USDA and the World Board over these last few months, and particularly in this January report, or the difference between the January report and the previous months. But I've got to give kudos to Lance Honig, to Seth Meyer. Those two in particular have been more than willing to come out and talk about how they got to the numbers and explain the methodology and answer questions about these numbers from farmers, not just from us, but from farmers directly. And Seth Meyer coming on as the new USDA economist. I've had conversations with him. He is very interested in being very apparent and very available to the public to talk about the work of that office. So I think you are going to see, even though the conversation has been good in the last 4 years, I think you're going to see even more transparency in the next 4 years, and particularly because of those two gentlemen. We have heard from his name's escaping me, but chairman of the World Board wants to come on to AgriTalk.
Mark
Jakanowski. Yeah. I think in the next WASD report after that, you're going to see Mr. Jakanowski on AgriTalk to talk about their numbers. So there is a transparency there, but it is also an acknowledgement that they have some public relations work to do to build confidence in the numbers they're providing because of some of these questions, and that they need to have a conversation to build that confidence. Like Frank points out, he says there hasn't been faith in these numbers in more than 15 years. I would agree that there have been questions about how they come up with these numbers.
But without them, John, you would be at the mercy of people who can pay a lot of money to have a survey done for them. Okay. So at least this is a reference point, right or wrong.
Yeah.
I would say that. And two, I would really encourage any listener, especially from the producer side, to come up. I know in August, Farm Bureau always has state groups come up, and the World Board and NASS gives them, they go inside the lockup and they go through the procedures of the myriad of things they do with how they get the information in and overnight from various states and how it's put together at the last minute. No one knows the final number, very few people do. So I would behoove you to come to Washington, and looks like August you'll be able to with the vaccine rollouts. And see the process, not perfect, but once you see the process and the painstaking safety nets that they have to put involved in that, I think that it'll be an educational process. Not saying that it should not be improved, because it should. I just think they have to modernize their system.
Yeah, and people on here and elsewhere commenting that politics is involved in the NASS and World Board numbers. You and I would both wholeheartedly say no. That any questions we have are about methodology. We have absolutely no question that there is not politics pressuring those numbers at all.
Would they be that dumb? No, I don't think so. You don't want a forecast to be wrong, politically. No, but it does raise that. That angle, and that's what's sad about this, because you can pick a year and people complain about it, and I remember even when Farm Journal's John Phipps at the time said, "Are we better off without numbers?" And I just disagreed with him then, and I would disagree with anyone who says that, because it's a reference point. And with Pro Farmer Crop Tours, you can go out and seek your own truth and other surveys and things like that. But I do think you need a reference point for those many producers who just cannot afford private surveys or newsletters or things like that. So I do think we need it as a base, and I'm going to it's going to be very important for me to hear how Mr. Hoenig speaks out on Tuesday on AgriTalk.
Yeah, that's Tuesday morning's AgriTalk show. Lance Hoenig, who is the head of the crops division for the National Ag Statistics Service. Well, we've already gone long, Jim, so might as well keep it going for one last item, and that's the renewable fuel standard. And it's been kind of a weird back and forth this week. We had Reuters coming out with a story saying that two sources told them that EPA was preparing to approve the majority of the small refinery exemption requests sent for the 2019 year. And then we come out, EPA does not, at least at this point, it doesn't look like they can do it, because they've put forward motions in the Federal Registry for E15 pumps and to prolong the RFS process and really kind of punting these issues into the next administration. It's been a weird roller coaster ride this week, Jim.
Yeah, I thought it was odd when Reuters first came out with their story, because I thought, that doesn't square with the pending. Why would you do that when the Supreme Court ruling on whether waivers must qualify as an extension in order to announce what they did? So, and that eventually was the case. They got to wait the Supreme Court ruling again on whether waivers must qualify as an extension. So now it makes more sense to me, actually.
Yeah.
And, so yeah, you can call it punting, but they're waiting on the Supreme Court ruling. Now, what also was either misreported or not written very well is EPA has proposed small, not all refineries, small refineries will have until November 30th this year to comply with the 2019 RFS requirements. And so that was either misreported or misconstrued too. And this morning, John, USDA is seeking public comments on modifying E15 pump labels or removing them entirely. So that's a whole nother notice for public comments that I haven't had time to read the Federal Reserve document because they were very late for the first time in many years putting out the Federal Register. I think they had some glitches in the printing process. But bottom line on biofuels, it continues to be a program that goes herky jerky up and down. And I have learned I'm not going to believe the news services anymore on that. I've got to get it directly from an EPA official that will go public with this because I think this was misconstrued 2 days ago.
Yeah, and I know the biofuels groups are upset about that extension for complying with the 2019 requirements, but until the court rules on those 2019 SREs, they can't really comply until they know exactly what the landscape is.
Fair argument.
Fair argument. All right. Before we wrap up, it sounds like Farmer Tom ought to be our hemp expert. He says, on the bright side, USDA publishes final rule for the domestic production of hemp, and we won. Highlights 30-day harvest window, 1% negligence threshold remediation, risk performance-based sampling. Boom, pow. Today we farm #hemp. So there you go.
Well, that's
Tom
good.
is happy.
See there? Our knowledgeable listeners. Yeah, we have more details, so that's it.
There you go. All right. Well, Jim, where are you going to be watching for Signal this week?
Well, the Senate, impeachment timeline, or whether or not there will be an impeachment effort and things like that. Two, from a market perspective, if this bull market, we had quite a run up this week, multi-year highs in corn, soybeans, and wheat. We'll see if that continues. We'll also have the inauguration. It's really Fortress, DC here. It really is. So they're encouraging no one to fly into DC for the inauguration, and I don't blame them. And we're going to see.
That's kind of sad.
Yeah, it is very sad. I remember going to two. I went to Reagan's inauguration, both of them, and I went to one of Bill Clinton's. That, as a news person, as a wire service person back in those days, I remember sitting right down below where they were, and it was just a good feeling from both sides. It was good because I love the country that way. So I'll be watching that and answering a lot of emails. I know, getting involved in this $2.3 billion and see where CFAP 3 payments are. That's what's on my list for next week, plus a couple of virtual speeches. Crop insurance, I think, is coming up. That's a favorite topic of mine. And I'm going out to Missouri in February to a trip to the pork producers, Missouri pork producers. Don't have my vaccine yet, but hopefully I have it before I go out. So that's what I'm working on, John.
All right. And I got to tell you, I am looking forward to Wednesday. Not that I'm so much looking forward to Biden being inaugurated, but just the notion of, with everything that has been going on in this country, and it's not going to all end, but it is a bit of wiping the slate clean and starting over again. And I'm looking forward to seeing that, and hopefully the kind of patriotism for the country that you just expressed, Jim, about being proud of what we do, and that there is a peaceful transfer of power.
Absolutely.
And that we do have a Congress and an administration and a Supreme Court that all are there to protect us and bring the country forward. So thank you so much. Thanks, Jim, for separating the signal and the noise for us one more week. We appreciate it.
Okay. We'll see you next week.
And thanks to all of you for your questions and comments. Really do appreciate them. And join us back here again, 2 p.m. Eastern on the AgriTalk Facebook page for another edition of DC Signal to Noise.